Lexi here with my November reading wrap-up. So I'm going to tell you about the 5 books I read in November, give you my thoughts on them, my star ratings, and yeah, let's get to it. So I'm going to end up saving the first book that I read in November until the end. It's likely I'm going to get a little emotional about it, so I'm going to leave it to the end and get through everything else first. The second book that I read in November is Axioms by Lindsay Ellis. So this is Lindsay Ellis's debut novel. She is, well, at least for me, best known as a video essayist on YouTube. And I've been watching her for a few years and I've always really enjoyed her content. So when she came out with her first novel this summer, I was really excited to read it. Axioms is somewhat of a period piece. It takes place in the mid-2000s, sometime after the US has started its Iraq invasion. And a couple of weeks before the start of the book, a large meteor thing hit this area in California and was called the ampersand event. Shortly after the start of this book, there is another meteor type thing that strikes the same exact spot. And it's aliens. Not much of a spoiler there. And you're following this young woman who has dropped out of college and is trying to figure out what she wants her life to be, and is kind of just working temp jobs that her mom has worked hard to get for her. And there is also a strained relationship with her father. He is this big conspiracy theorist who left the family 5 years ago over this, and he is certain that there are aliens in the United States and on Earth, and the government knows about it and is trying to hide it. The story follows the daughter Cora. Cora gets dragged into this story against her will, and she has to end up working with the government and this alien to protect her family. The start of this book was a little bit slow for me. I didn't super connect well with Cora. For some reason, I kept getting this Area 51 vibe from it, and I like aliens and alien sci-fi, but not particularly the big head, giant eyes type of aliens. So I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't until we got a good description of the alien that I was really able to get into it. And once we do, the alien and Cora end up having to become partners out of necessity. I think the alien design is really neat. It kind of reminds me, or when I envision it, I kind of see this really chic and slick and holographic Slender Man crossed with an alien from Alien. Not nearly as scary though. Once the book starts to really develop that relationship between Cora and the alien that she has named Ampersand, because in that initial meteor strike, that was Ampersand coming to this planet, so she's named it after that event. Once they start to really become friends, the book started to click for me. I've never seen E.T., but I imagine this is a similar story to that, hey, making buds with an alien. Overall, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars and look forward to its sequel. The next book I read in November is the story collection Smashed by Junji Ito. So I talked a little bit about what this book is about in my own TBR video. I'm not going to talk about every story in here, I'm just going to talk about 3 of my favorites. The first story I want to talk about is Earthbound. So randomly, all across Japan, people start showing up in kind of strange places around the city, around cities and villages and stuff, in these weird stances and poses. It looks like there is an invisible rope tying them to their position. They're alive and able to speak a little bit, but they can't move. Slowly, you figure out why these specific people are being tied up to their locations and why those locations have meaning. I really liked it up until I think the ending was okay. It was kind of a little bit predictable, but still overall a good read. The next story that I liked here was The Mystery of the Haunted House. So there is this haunted house, shack sort of thing that pops up out of the edge of this town. The owner of this mystery house is charging ridiculously high prices for admission, and he says that it is a guaranteed scare, and if you go through the house, come out, and are not scared, you get your money back, and he will pack up and leave town with his house. At the start of the story, we see this man take him up on this challenge, pays the price, goes in, and sometime later he comes running out screaming. So that's a pretty good sign that yeah, it is actually pretty scary. And these two kids, around middle school age, they decide to, I believe they come back and like sneak in at night to really figure out if it was scary or not. I would say the plot of this story is fine, it's average, you know, it's a haunted house. I really think it shines in its horror imagery. So this is just a little example of that. I think the short story is worth a read just based on its horrific imagery alone. And then the last short story I wanted to talk about here is Smashed. So this is the title of the short story collection as well as the short story. And I think it's the best one out of all of them. And I don't really want to say too much, but basically this man just gets home to Japan from a trip to South America, and he brings back this magically, mysteriously delicious nectar. Once you eat some of it, you can't stop. It's just that good. But the catch is you cannot, absolutely cannot let anyone see you consume it. He doesn't know why that is. He just knows that's the rule. And he shares this with his friend. And I'm gonna stop there. If you want to know more, definitely if you're gonna read only one of these stories, I would say it should be Smashed because good stuff. Immediately after reading this, I wanted to give it a 4 out of 5 stars, but after letting it sit for a few days and then going back to see all the short stories I read to pick out my favorites, I realized there weren't that many that were my favorites. So I ultimately gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Still a good read, but you know, it was okay. The next book that I read was Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and this is another one that comes from my own TBR list. And it is a dystopian sci-fi. In a society segregated into color-coded castes, we follow Darrow, who is this low-born red whose journey starts at, in the depths of Mars' crust, mining for resources for the Golds. The Golds being the highest ranking caste in the whole society. Basically, every other caste their sole purpose is to provide either goods or services for the Golds. They are basically the only important people in society. We also early on learn of this terrorist organization called the Sons of Ares, and they kind of pick Darrow to die for the cause, but really they fake his death so that he can be reborn as a created Gold. They recreate him as a Gold to look and feel and run and all that stuff as close to a Gold as possible, so that he can then apply and ultimately does get into the Institute. It's like this school for Golds that you can test into and all that, and you go through this year of schooling, and then afterwards you can do different apprenticeships to start your career and make connections and stuff like that. So they want Darrow to go through this institute and come out as on top as possible so that he can go into their society and hopefully lead some starships and ultimately help bring their society crumbling down. Going into the school setting, I was kind of getting ready for a scenario similar to what I read in the Poppy War, where it's like this elite school for elite students, and it's all about focusing on military strength and power and that kind of stuff. And it is kind of like that. It's just there aren't any classes, really. All these students get drafted into one of these 13 houses named after a Roman god, and afterwards they get just kind of dumped into this valley on Mars, and each house has their own castle, and they have a year to basically go to war with each other. I did really like this surprise Hunger Games sort of war game. Kind of surprised me, but I got really into it. I was definitely feeling for some of these gold students that I didn't expect to, humanizes them a little bit. Darrow is drafted into House Mars, and I really like the relationship with another of the Mars students, Cassius Bellona, and I'm really excited to see where they take that relationship in the second book that I have also started. I think it's called The Golden Sun. I also really liked the chemistry between Darrow and Mustang. It was a bit of a killjoy to constantly hear about Darrow's dead teenage wife, but that's fine. I did end up giving this book 5 stars, not because I think it's perfect and it's amazing literature, but because I really enjoyed it, and the difference between a 4 and a 5 star for me is not huge. It's just based on feeling at that point to really get it over the line into 5 stars. I did have an issue with Darrow's dead, martyred wife being used as a sort of disposable woman trope. It really felt like her existence, her death, and her relationship to Darrow was only put there to give Darrow a reason to want to fight back against his society. Because at the beginning of the book, he doesn't really think about, life in his bubble. It's Io, his wife, who has these rebellious thoughts and feelings. And I guess I understand why the writer would want to focus the story on Darrow, but it would have been nice if he had some reasoning beyond just, oh, my wife's dead. But I'll let it go. After Red Rising, I read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and I really enjoyed it. It was a very fun book, not terribly complicated or heavy, just really chill, spooky vibes. So this is a sci-fi fantasy, although a lot of the time you're gonna forget that it's a sci-fi because there is such a heavy focus on the fantasy aspects, but that's okay with me. It has a very good spooky skeleton setting. It is set in a universe where there are a lot of necromancers. It focuses on these 9 different houses, all serving under the god emperor. Each house has a sort of different style of necromancy. The 9th house specializes in raising skeletons. So you can take one piece of a skeleton, let's say a knuckle bone or something, and then using necromancy, they can create an entire skeleton just from that one bone. And it's so good. I had a lot of fun reading it. And our main character is Gideon. She is one of 2 young people in this house. It's her and the reverend daughter Harrowhark Nonagissimus, and she is Harrowhark is the heir to this family. and an actual necromancer. Gideon is not a necromancer. She fights with a sword, and since she was orphaned as a child, she was raised by the church, but she didn't really get any love from them, like at all, and she, from a very young age, has tried to just constantly escape. She's never been successful, and at the beginning of the book, we see her latest attempt, and it's stopped by Harrowhark herself, and basically gives her this choice. Either she fails her escape and, goes back to her life of servitude to the house, or she works to earn her escape by helping her become her cavalier, because all the other houses get summoned to these series of trials, and if anyone succeeds in getting through all the trials, they then rise to this really powerful and immortal position of eternal servant to the emperor. I really enjoyed this book, and I do look forward to reading the continuation of the story in the sequel. The ending was weird, not quite what I expected, but still fun. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. If you'd like to hear more about my thoughts on this book, including some minor to major spoilers, then please go check out my reading blog on this. The last book that I'm going to talk about today is actually the first book that I read in November, and that is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. So, this book means a lot to me, and I'll explain why in a bit. This volume follows the relationship of Nick and Charlie, a continuation from the first 2 volumes. Nick and Charlie are 2 high school aged boys that go to this all-boys school in England, and in this volume, they, along with classmates from their school, as well as their sister all-girls school, go on a trip to Paris, and they all get to be cute together and hang out and stuff. We get to see Nick and Charlie start to work through some pretty big things. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but I guess trigger warning for stuff related to eating disorders. As always, I really like seeing these 2 together. They are so cute and so wholesome, and I love them very much. And we also get to see some of the other side characters and their relationships. So previously, a lesbian couple has been established, so we get to see them hang out with Nick and Charlie, and a new relationship starts to blossom between one of the boys from the all-boys school and a trans girl from the all-girls school who used to go to the all-boys school. They're very cute together, and everyone is just cute. This whole book is cute. I highly recommend it. Okay, so one of the reasons why I wanted to save this one for last was because it means a whole lot to me. And in chapter 4, Out, Nick comes out to his mother as bisexual, and she's really supportive of him. She gives him a big hug, and she says how proud she is for feeling comfortable enough to come to her with this. She's just a wonderful person, a wonderful mom. It was a very sweet scene, and it destroyed me. As I was reading it, I just started sobbing, just huge tears, and I couldn't stop. And okay. For some background, I am a bisexual woman. I have never dated women and probably won't. I am married to a man, and I love him very much. He is the one for me. And I never officially came out. Like, most of my friends know, my husband obviously knows, I told my sister, but everyone else, not really. It didn't seem like it was important enough for me to ever tell them. that's until this book. Having it hit me so hard made me realize how much I wanted to tell my parents about this part of me. Not because, it changes anything, it's just letting them know who I am and who I always have been. So, my plan was always to tell my parents if I ever got a girlfriend, but that didn't happen, and it probably won't ever. So for the longest time, I didn't really feel like I had a good reason to bring this up to them. Part of me was a little worried about how they were going to take it. I wasn't terrified, but, nervous. Like, is this going to change anything between us? Are they going to view me any differently? So on a random weekday call with them, I came out as bi. They were a little surprised, but they took it well, and they said they still love me and all that, and this doesn't change anything. It was a huge relief. I'm so happy and proud of myself for finally doing that and just not having to hide that part of myself from anyone again. And it woo, books are powerful. I mean, so thank you, Alice Oseman, for creating the book that encouraged me to come out to my parents. It will forever be in my heart for that reason, and it's also just a really good book. 5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, those are all of the books I read in November. I'm really excited to get to reading all the stuff I want to get to in December. Hopefully I have a little bit more time, or make a little bit more time to read for myself. And I hope you all have a great reading month ahead of you. See you all in the next one.